Welcome to the Pandemonium Witches podcast, where the ADHD has just a touch of autism, where the true crime is as scary as the hauntings and unsolved cases. But the hosts never stay on topic for long. I'm Kat.
I'm Rachel.
I'm Em.
And I'm Meg.
Keep your arms, legs, and other extremities in the vehicle at all times, and enjoy the show. This is part 2 of the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. This is a Pandemonium Witches podcast. Trigger warning. The following episode contains graphic violence and gruesome depictions. Listener discretion is advised. We tell you not to go home with strangers.
But the 80s were a different time.
The 80s were a different time. I mean, let me tell you.
Doesn't mean they were any better.
They were not, no.
So, at this point, his dad was like, look, my son needs a lawyer. So he hired Gerald Boyle. And at his lawyer's, pushing, Dahmer underwent a whole bunch of psychological evals prior to his court hearings. And these evaluations found that he harbored deep feelings of alienation.
Mm-hmm. Which
makes sense with how he kind of grew up. The second evaluation, 2 months later, found out that he had impulsive individualism. He was very suspicious of others, and he was dismayed by his lack of accomplishments in life. His probation officer also referenced an 87 diagnosis where he was diagnosed with suffering from schizoid personality disorder.
Ooh.
In January of 89, he pled guilty to the charges of second-degree SA and enticing a child for immoral purposes. However, the sentencing was suspended until May, so he wasn't sentenced right away. On March 20th, he commenced a 10-day Easter absence from work, during which he moved back into his grandmother's home.
Poor Grandma.
Poor Granny.
2 months after his conviction and 2 months prior to his sentencing, he murdered his fifth victim, a 24-year-old mixed-race aspiring model named Anthony Sears. He had met him at a gay bar in March of 89, and according to him, this particular occasion, he just wasn't looking to commit a crime. However, shortly before closing time that evening, Sears, he just talked to me. We just started having a conversation. So he brought him to Grandma's house, where they engaged in acts before he was drugged and strangled.
Oh my God.
The next morning, Dahmer woke up, washed his face, took the corpse, and put him in Grandma's bathtub.
Oh.
Where he decapitated the body before attempting to flay the corpse.
Of course.
He stripped the flesh, pulverized the bones, and threw it in the trash. According to the cannibal, he found Sears exceptionally.
Exceptionally.
That's the word.
Exceptionally.
Okay.
Two different words.
Why did I put words in here that I can't pronounce?
You know, you wanted to blow it out of the water today. That's what you want to do. You already are, but
I'm using direct quotes.
Okay.
So he found him exceptionally attractive. And Sears was the first victim who he permanently retained any body parts from. He kept his head.
Of course.
And his dingling in acetone. And stored them in a wooden box, which he later placed in his work locker.
Fun fact. Did you know that when you're taxiderming items, it has to be above 70 proof alcohol?
Yep.
And you don't actually, I talked to a taxidermy specialist this weekend because Sydney had a couple of questions and she was like, can I do this? And I said, as long as it's above 70 proof alcohol and you don't have to burp the container. You can if you want to, but the fluid on the top is just the acid leaving the body.
Yeah.
You don't have to. It ends up eventually getting mixed in. You don't have to burp the but fun fact.
So when he moved to a new address the following year, he took the remains. So he has stayed at this night shift job for a while.
Longer than the others.
Looks like it, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's night shift.
Mm-hmm.
Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction with work release so he could keep his job. And at this time, in 1989, he was required to register as a sex offender.
What?
So it looks like the registry did start up, and because this one, like, he actively touched a child, he had to register.
Jiminy.
5 years, 2 months before his scheduled release, he was paroled. His 5-year probation imposed in 1989 began at this point. So he then temporarily moved back in with grandma.
Again.
Yep. So now we're in 1990. This is where the 90s murders happen.
Okay.
In May of 90, he moved out of grandma's house and into another apartment, taking Sears with him. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to re-explain everything. Although this apartment was located in a very high crime area, his new apartment was close to work and it was pretty cheap. At the time, it was a very cheap apartment. Now it's a cheap apartment. And the monthly included bills like electricity and water and all that. It was $300 a month.
That's...
Electric, water, and gas was all included.
That's a steal.
Within a week of moving to this new address, he killed his 6th victim, Raymond Smith.
Jesus Christ.
Wasting no time there.
Right.
He was a 32-year-old prostitute who Dahmer lured to his apartment with the promise of money for sex. And mind you, the money that he keeps offering is $50.
That at that time, it wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a little.
I want to look up an inflation calculator. Because I want to see, we'll say 86 was the last time.
Uh-huh.
If I purchased an item for $50.86, $142.49 is how much that same item would cost. So he's basically offering $150.
$150.
Or $145, round to the nearest 5. For photos, for sex, for all of this. Yeah. Because the first, if I remember right, the first time he offered $50 was in 85. That's $145.14. That's 190.3% inflation.
Yep.
Okay, now hold on. Side note. Now I'm curious. If I bought something for $50 in 1905,
in 1905,
there is no inflation rate. But if I did it in 1950, it's almost $650.
Jeez.
Anyway, sorry about that.
It's ridiculous.
Keep
So
talking. I'll be right back. I know this part because I just finished this on the episode on Netflix.
Oh yeah. So inside the apartment, when he brought the guy there, he gave him a drink laced with 7 sleeping pills. Seems like overkill. And then strangled him.
I feel like the 7 sleeping pills was a bit excessive.
A little. Like 2 would get the job done. 7 is just really making sure.
Yeah.
The following day, Dahmer purchased a camera, a Polaroid,
Yep.
with which he took several photos of his body in suggestive positions before dismembering him.
What the hell?
Yep. He boiled the legs, arms, and pelvis in a steel kettle with Soilex, which then allowed him to rinse the bones in the sink easier.
Jesus.
He then dissolved the remainder of the skeleton, excluding the skull, in a container filled with acid. He then later spray painted the skull, and then he placed the skull alongside the skull of Sears on a black towel in the filing cabinet.
Just, wow.
Yeah. Approximately a week after the murder, on or about May 27th, he lured another man into his apartment. Dahmer accidentally consumed the drink that was meant for his guest. Like, I was like, this one's yours. Okay. Wait.
Crunk with the poison drinks.
Yep. And he awoke the following day where he discovered the man had stolen several items of clothing, $300, and his watch.
Serves him right.
Yep.
So Dahmer never reported this to the cops. He was like,
Of course.
nope. Although he did tell his probation officer he got robbed.
And drugged.
Because,
yeah.
No, just robbed.
Oh.
Because had he told him he'd been drugged, then we got to go to the hospital, this, that, and the third.
You can keep talking. I'm just going to mute myself.
So he never told him that, told the cops, because if he did, the cops were going to show up and be like, okay, well, what was stolen? They were going to poke around and then possibly find the heads.
Oh my God.
In June of 1990, he lured another man, Edward Smith. So he killed 2 Smiths by the looks of it. Raymond Smith and Edward Smith. He drugged him and strangled him.
Uh-huh.
On this occasion, however, instead of immediately dipping the bones in acid or even repeating previous processes with bleaching, he rendered the previous victim's skulls brittle. So he was like, let's try something else. He put his skeleton in the freezer for several months in the hope it wouldn't retain moisture.
Uh-huh.
That didn't work. It did not remove the moisture. The skeleton of his victim would acidify several months later. Dahmer accidentally destroyed the skull when he placed it in the oven to dry, a process that caused the skull to explode.
Holy crap!
What? Dahmer later informed the police that he felt rotten about Smith's murder and he had been unable to retain any parts of his body.
Not by choice.
But
so,
how did
it explode?
No! How did he not get caught with the head exploding? Like, have you not heard something explode in an oven?
He probably said something like it was a turkey or something. So
he said something.
Here's a quote from 93. Dahmer recollecting his motivations for photographing his victims and retaining sections of their skull. It was my way of remembering their appearance and their physical beauty. I also wanted to keep, and then they cut out a section. If I couldn't keep them there with me whole, I could at least keep their skeletons.
That's how you get haunted.
Yeah. I see a lot of the time people saying that they want to try and contact the ghost of Jeffrey Dahmer.
No.
I just want to
please
put this
don't
out there. Do not try to contact the ghost of serial killers, point blank period.
To be fair, this is the only time I will ever discuss this because confidentiality for my clients, that's a part of the thing that I offer. I had one client whose daughter was a victim of a murderer. I will never cover their case per their request. Our team will never cover their case. You will find this out later that it is not on any of our lists.
For a reason.
For a reason. We will never be able to cover it. It's the one case that I will put my foot down on. She asked me to contact him. They wanted her remains found.
Understandable.
She's native. So
yeah,
I had to do this outside at a graveyard where I felt safe because I was not about to bring that home.
Yeah.
And when I tell you, when I blacked out, because normally I black out for a couple of days after a medium reading, I normally, you know, I'm functioning, but I don't remember or retain anything for 2 to 3 days. You've seen this.
Yeah.
2 weeks. I don't remember
Jesus.
2 weeks of my life. And it's something I will never get back, but I remember those memories. I remember what he saw. And I will relive that some days. And it is haunting, to say the least.
Yeah.
Do not ask a medium. Do not use a Ouija board. Do not do anything. Like, we discussed that on Meg's episode. Do not use Ouija boards.
At all.
No.
Ever.
No.
Yeah, no. I've seen people go in and being like, oh yeah, I'm going to try and... Don't. Because that's going to follow you.
The dead need to stay dead.
Mm-hmm.
They do. Let sleeping animals lie.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of Ouija boards, did you guys see that TikTok of the person that broke up a Ouija board and used it as a door shim?
Rachel sent it to me. I sent it to you.
Cool. Yeah. Don't do that either.
I mean, the people that found it didn't do it. They just happened to find it.
Wait, did someone just say something?
That was my mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have said no.
I would have been like, it's not me.
I would have shit myself.
Oh, man.
That was perfect timing for her to do that.
It really was. All right, so less than 3 months after that murder of Edward Smith, he encountered another native, Chicago native. He was 22, named Ernest Miller, outside of a bookstore. He agreed to follow Dahmer to his apartment for $50 and further agreed to allow him to listen to his heart and stomach.
Like stethoscope?
No, just like put his head on his, and just listen.
That's weird.
When Dahmer attempted to perform oral on him, he was informed that'll cost you extra.
Smart. Cash up front.
To which Dahmer then gave him a drink. He was like, oh yeah, of course, here, have a Coke that was laced with 2 sleeping pills, which we discussed this. 2 would have worked. Why 7?
Yeah.
He gave him 7?
No,
no. Somebody else
gave him 7 sleeping pills.
Right.
On this occasion, Dahmer only had the 2 sleeping pills to give to his victim.
That's probably why he only gave him 2.
Yeah,
right.
Because he gave the other one 7. So instead of strangling him, he cut his carotid with the same knife he used to dissect his victims' bodies.
I mean, I guess you don't have to worry about cross-contamination or infection.
So he bled out within minutes.
Oh.
I mean, that's kind of what happens when you hit the carotid.
Yeah. He then posed the body in several suggestive ways and took photos with the Polaroid before placing it in his bathtub again to dismember.
What the fuck is with bathtubs, man?
The drain.
I was about to say that.
Okay. Well, I mean that's fair. But also, if you don't clean it properly, the blood does stay in the caulking, just to let you know. Caulking, sorry.
Dahmer repeatedly kissed and talked to the severed head while he dismembered the rest of the body.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's weird.
So he, like, if this can of Coke was the head, he was like, "You're doing so good while I cut off your arm. Yes, you're doing so good."
That's so weird.
It's so wrong. I mean, all of this is wrong, to be fair.
Yes.
Yeah. He then wrapped up his heart, liver, biceps. Ow. And portions of flesh from his legs into plastic bags and put them in the freezer to later eat. This is the, I think this is the victim where he started eating.
That's something else.
He then boiled the remaining flesh and organs into a, quote, jelly-like substance, which then enabled him to rinse the flesh off of the skeleton that he intended to retain. To preserve the skeleton, Dahmer placed the bones in a light bleach solution instead of a heavy bleach like he had been doing for only 24 hours before allowing them to dry on a cloth for a week. The head was originally placed in the fridge before being stripped of flesh and then painted and coated with enamel.
I don't think that's what that's supposed to.
Yep.
Okay.
3 weeks after this murder.
Oh, of course there's more. There's always more.
This is just 1990. He murdered another 22-year-old named David Thomas at the mall.
The Wendy's guy? Sorry.
Oh, no, he encountered him at the mall. Thank God.
Okay.
Killed him at his apartment, but encountered him at the mall.
My bad.
I was about to say, the mall was very public.
I know.
I mean, you've seen a lot of serial killers kill at a mall, to be fair. Persuaded him to come to his apartment for a couple of drinks with additional money on offer if he would pose for photographs. Now, mind you, this guy was a dad of 2. He was a dad.
It's so sad.
In his statement to the cops after he was arrested, he said that after giving Thomas a drink laced with sedatives, he didn't really feel attracted to him, but he was afraid of letting him wake up, fearing he would have been angry about being drugged. So he just killed and dismembered him.
I mean, I would get pretty pissed about if I woke up from being drugged.
Yeah. Right.
So, and originally he wasn't going to retain any of the body parts. So he just photographed the dismemberment process and kept the photos, which later helped aid in his identification.
Oh.
So the photos helped identify him.
I mean, it's what he gets for keeping souvenirs. So
right.
2, with the heads he kept, because they couldn't find the bodies, they had to identify these people with their dental records.
That's sad.
Following that murder, Dahmer didn't kill anyone for about 5 months. Although, on about 5 occasions between October of 90 and February of 91, he unsuccessfully lost his riz. He could not lure anyone to his apartment.
So it's not because he chose to stop killing. He just couldn't find any victims.
Exactly. He regularly complained about feelings of anxiety and depression to his probation officer. And then frequent references to his sexuality, his lifestyle, financial difficulties, and then shortly before Thanksgiving, his apprehension regarding meeting and facing with his dad and younger brother. It was also noted by his probation officer there were several occasions which Dahmer admitted to feeling slip and slidle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
So now we're in 1991. We're not even close to being done. He murdered 17 people.
And 91 alone?
Oh, God, no. Just all together. He murdered 17 people. In February of 91, he killed a 17-year-old named Kermis Strotter. He was at a bus stop near a university. So he was like, hey, I'll give you $50 if you pose nude for my photos. And then after you do that, we'll have a go at it. So brought him home, cuffed his hands behind his back after drugging him.
Because he learned.
Strangled him to death with a leather strap. He then dismembered him, kept his hands, skull, and dingling, and photographed each stage of the process of dismemberment. 2 months after that, we're in April now, he encountered a 19-year-old named Errol Lindsay. He was on his way to get a new key cut for his apartment. Dahmer brought him to his apartment, drugged him, and this is the first time he had ever done something like this. He wanted to create a sex zombie, so he drilled a hole into his skull while he was still alive and injected hydrochloric acid with a baster into his brain.
Oh
my
God.
Yeah. To try and get him to be submissive. According to Dahmer, Lindsay awoke after this experiment, which he was hoping beyond hope it would induce like a permanent, unresistant, submissive state. And he woke up and was like, I have a headache. What time is it? To which Dahmer drugged him again, strangled him, and decapitated him.
Oh my God.
Kept his head, flayed his body, put his skin in a cold water solution, like water and salt, for several weeks, hoping to retain it. Reluctantly, he did dispose of the skin after it became too frayed and brittle.
Oh my God.
So by 91, the people of the apartments he was at, the Oxford apartments, they were calling up this manager daily. It smells terrible in apartment 213. You need to do something.
Yeah.
Hey, it sounds like shit is falling at all times of the day and night. You need to do something. Hey, I hear a chainsaw in 213, like every so often. You need to do something. So finally, Sopa Pricewell, who was the building's manager, contacted Dahmer, which is what I'm just going to call him from now on.
Uh-huh.
In response to all of these complaints.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, what is going on? Initially, he excused the odors leaving his apartment as being caused by his freezer breaking and the contents in it, like, spoiling. On later occasions, like afterwards, dude, I know it's not your freezer. What is going on? He informed him, the resurgence of the odor is that a lot of my fish died recently. I'll take care of the matter. Because he had a fish tank. Oh yeah, I had tropical fish. They died. My bad.
There's no way it's gonna smell. No.
Like, that is such a temporary smell if you take care of it. Like,
right.
In May, we're still in 91. In May, he encountered a 31-year-old aspiring model named Tony Hughes at a nightclub. He said, "Hey, come back to my apartment. I'll give you $50. We'll do some photos." He was then drugged into unconsciousness before he too had a hole drilled into his head and was injected with hydrochloric acid.
What is it with him and drilling holes into people's head? Does he want to lobotomize them?
So what he's trying to do is he's trying to disable their will and render them submissive into like a sex slave. to where they just don't move and he can do whatever he wants to them.
Obviously, it's not working.
Yeah, because remember, back, he was like, you know, I don't mind the act, but you guys are just moving too much. However, unlike the last victim, this drilling and injection proved fatal. He drilled too deep, and the acid just ate his brain.
Right.
So, May 26th, he encountered another 14-year-old Lao teenager. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his last name, but his first name is Conriac on Wisconsin Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Unknown to Dahmer, this victim is the younger brother of the boy he molested in 88.
No.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So he was like, hey, I'll give you $50. You want to pose for some photos? According to Dahmer, he was like, I don't know. Like, look at the time. My parents are expecting me home soon. I don't know if I can.
I gotta go.
Right.
And then he changed his mind. He was like, but it's $50. You know, I could do a lot with $50. So, you know what? Yeah, sure. I'll go with you. Went to his apartment. He posed in his underwear for about 2 photos before Dahmer drugged him into unconsciousness and then performed acts on him.
Like, okay.
Before
should have stuck with the no.
Yeah.
Right.
Before he fell unconscious, Dahmer led the young boy into his room where the body of his last victim, whom he had killed 3 days earlier, was naked on the floor.
In the other room?
Yeah, he brought him to the master bedroom, so the primary bedroom, while the dude was, like, he had been drugged, but he was still conscious.
Uh-huh.
Brought him to this room where this dead man was. And according to Dahmer, he believed that this young boy saw the body, but did not react to the bloated corpse, likely because of the side effects of the pills he had ingested. He probably thought that he was dreaming at this point.
Holy crap.
So, in this occasion, he drilled a narrow hole into the crown of this young man's skull. So right up here, and injected the hydrochloric acid into his frontal lobe.
Uh-huh.
He then drank several beers, got drunk, laying next to him before falling asleep for a little bit, and then leaving his apartment to drink at a bar and get more alcohol. He was like, what's he gonna do? He's fine. He's unconscious.
He's not gonna go anywhere.
Right.
The next morning, he returned to his apartment to discover that the young boy had left his apartment. He was sitting naked on the corner of 25th and State, talking in Lao, so in his native language, with 3 distressed young women sitting near him.
Oh my God.
I mean, I'd be kind of distressed too.
Dahmer approached the young women and told them that the young man, whom he referred to as the alias of Jong Hyum, was his friend, and attempted to lead him back to the apartment by his arm.
Ma'am.
The 3 women were like, hey, no, don't, no. We already called 911. The cops are on the way.
Good for them.
Right? I know there's a but.
2 cops showed up. John Balkerzak and Joseph Garbish. When they showed up, Dahmer, he relaxed. He just put on a mask, and he told the officers that this young man here was his boyfriend, and he had gotten too drunk following like a fight, and he frequently acted like this when he was drunk. And Dahmer had added his lover had consumed Jack Daniel's whiskey that evening. So the three women that were there were exasperated. One of them had attempted to indicate to one of the officers, both of whom observed no injuries beyond a scrape to his knee, believed him to be intoxicated, that the young boy had blood on his testicles and was bleeding from his rectum, and that he seemingly had struggled against Dahmer's attempts to walk him back to the apartment prior to their arrival. The officer told them to butt out, shut the hell up, don't interfere.
Right.
Like, we're the cops. Shortly after the cops arrived, 3 members of the fire department showed up. They examined the poor boy, looked for injuries, provided a blanket so he could be covered, because remember, he's naked. And the 3 believed that he needed treatment. But the officers told the fire department, get out of here. This is a cop's problem. Get out of here. Shortly after, Officer Richard Porbican arrived to the scene. He, Garbish, followed by the other guy, Balkazak, escorted Dahmer and his victim back to his apartment.
Ma'am!
As Dahmer repeatedly commented on the general crime in the neighborhood and his appreciation of the police. Inside his apartment, in an effort to verify his claim that he and his victim were lovers, Dahmer showed the officers the 2 semi-nude Polaroids he had taken of him the evening previous. Although one of the officers said he smelled nothing unusual, Garbish later stated he noted a strange scent reminiscent of excrement inside the apartment.
I wonder why.
Because there's a dead body in the other room.
It was the odor of the dead body decomposing. Dahmer stated that to investigate the odor, one officer simply peeked his head around the bedroom, but didn't really take a good look. When the officers left with a departing remark that Dahmer take good care of the young boy.
No.
This incident was listed by the officers as a domestic dispute.
You know, they had to have been fired after all of this came to light.
After the officers left his apartment, Dahmer injected acid back into the young boy's brain.
There it is.
The second injection proved to be fatal. The next day, the 28th, Dahmer took a day's leave from work to devote himself to dismembering the bodies that he had. He retained both of the skulls. Had the cops done their job?
Yes.
ACAB. Anyway, on June 30th, Dahmer traveled to Chicago. He met a 20-year-old named Matt Turner there. He was like, hey, you want to come back to my place for a professional photo shoot? I live in Milwaukee, though. And Turner was like, sure. So he went back to his apartment. They went all the way back to Milwaukee. Dahmer drugged, strangled, and dismembered him. Put his head and internal organs in separate plastic bags in the freezer. And just kind of left him there.
Ma'am.
Turner was not reported missing.
Ma'am.
5 days later, on July 5th, Dahmer lured a 23-year-old Jeremiah Winberger from a Chicago bar to his apartment on the promise of spending the weekend with him. He then drugged him, injected him twice with boiling water. Not even acid, just boiling water. Because he was like, well, the acid is killing them. So what if I just do water?
But boiling.
Drilled a hole, put boiling water in his skull. It put him in a coma. He died 2 days later. 10 days after that, 10 days after he took that boy, he encountered a 24-year-old, Oliver Lacey. Lacey agreed to posing nude for photos and went back to his apartment, where the pair engaged in tentative acts. It was kind of like, do I really want to do this, or do I just want to do the photos? Before Dahmer drugged him, he was like, no, we doing this. On this occasion, he intended to prolong the time he spent with Lacey alive. After he unsuccessfully tried to render him unconscious with chloroform, he phoned his workplace and requested a day's absence. It was granted, although the next day he was suspended for taking too much time from work.
They've got to have been suspicious.
After strangling Lacey, he engaged with the corpse, dismembered him.
Of course he did.
Put his head and heart in the fridge and his skeleton in the freezer. I need to know, how fucking big was his fridge?
It was probably just a standard fridge.
So how is the skeleton fitting in the freezer? 4 days later, July 19th, he got word from his work that he was fired. He was dismissed. After hearing this, pissed. Went out, found a 25-year-old. His name was Joseph Bradhoff. Said, hey, come back to my apartment. Came back to his apartment. Didn't even attempt to, drug him this time. He just straight strangled this dude. And left him lying in bed, covered with a sheet for 2 days. 2 days, after 2 days, he moved the sheet, and his head was covered in maggots.
Yeah.
He cut his head off, cleaned up his head, and put it in the fridge.
But the rest of the people.
Yep. There were like six skulls in the fridge now.
Just hanging out.
Just chatting.
Like that one sound. This is Barbara. This is Brianna. You know why we call her Brianna, don't you? Yeah.
He later put the torso in an acid bath along with 2 other victims killed in the previous month.
Ew.
So now we're in 91. We're in July. This is when he starts getting investigated and arrested. So July 22nd, he approaches 3 men with an offer of $100 to come back to his apartment and pose for nude photos, drink beer, and just hang out. One of the trio, Tracy Edwards, was like, yeah, I'll go. Upon entering the apartment, Edwards said, man, it smells in here. Hey, why do you have bottles of hydrochloric acid on the floor? And he was like, oh, I use that for cleaning bricks.
Right.
After some minor conversation, Edwards requested that, Edwards responded to Dahmer saying, hey, can you, look at my fish? That is when Dahmer handcuffed him, or at least attempted to handcuff him. He turned and was like, what the hell is happening?
Right.
He got one handcuff on, but he couldn't get the other.
Right.
He was then told, hey, we're taking photos. Come to my bedroom. Okay. But he did not let him cuff his hands together.
Right. Good.
While in the bedroom, he noted there's a lot of naked men posters in here. Why, if we're doing nude photos, why are you playing The Exorcist 3? Why do you have a blue 57-gallon drum in the corner that stinks to high heaven?
So he's actually...
Because the math ain't mathin'.
Right. He's figuring out that the math ain't mathin'.
At this point, Dahmer is like, you ask a lot of questions. Took out a knife and informed Edwards that he intended to take nude photos of him. He was like, okay, here. In an attempt to like calm him the hell down, started unbuttoning his shirt, saying that he would allow him to do it if he removed the handcuffs and put the knife away. In response to this promise, Dahmer turned his attention to the TV. Edwards observed that it looked like he was rocking back and forth and chanting before turning his attention back to him. He then placed his head on Edwards' chest to listen to his heartbeat, and then, with the knife pressed to his intended victim, informed Edwards that he intended to eat his heart.
I know Edwards was one of the ones that got away.
Yes.
Because
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. Okay, so spoiler alert, he gets away. Only reason why I know this is because when I was watching the TV show, I had to stop because I had to contact one of my friends who is a criminalist, and I had to go, hey, I need you to tell me, does this guy get away? And she goes, yes. And I said, okay, I can finish this episode. I haven't watched it since. It was like while he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
I can't watch any more of that.
Yeah.
Right.
So to like placate him and be like, yeah, don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me. Edwards repeated that, hey, I'm your friend. We're friends. I'm not going to run away. We're friends.
Placate? You mean?
Yeah, that's calm him down.
Placate.
That's the word. Edwards had decided that he was either going to jump out the window or run through the unlocked front door. So Dahmer never locked his front door with his victims because he's like, I'm drugging them.
Right.
I mean, kind of makes sense.
So at the next opportunity, he's like, I'm jumping or running.
Right.
That's when Edwards was like, I gotta pee. He asked if they could sit with a beer in the living room where there was air conditioning because there was no air conditioning in the bedroom.
Right.
Dahmer was like, sure. They walked to the living room where Edwards exited the bathroom. Inside the living room, Edwards waited until he saw Dahmer have a momentary lapse in concentration before requesting to use the bathroom again. When Edwards got up, he noted that Dahmer wasn't holding the handcuffs. So that's when Edwards was like, bitch, and punched him in the face. Knocked Dahmer off balance and fucking booked it out that front door. It was 11:30 at night. Edwards flagged down two cops, Robert Routh and Ruth Mueller.
Uh-huh.
The officers noted Edwards had a handcuff attached to his wrist, so he wasn't fully handcuffed, remember?
Right.
Whereupon he explained to the officers that a freak, quote, freak, had placed handcuffs on him and asked if the cops could remove them. So the brand of handcuffs that Dahmer had, the officer's cuff key did not work. Edwards agreed to accompany the officers where Edwards stated he had spent the previous 5 hours before escaping.
We needed some levity. It's been 2.5 hours. Look at that, kitten.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I did my research.
You did do your
It's
research.
my dad's. This is Midnight. She's my dad's cat. She's the one I keep hearing in my bed snoring.
Okay. So Edwards and the cops, they came to 213, and Dahmer was like, hello, friends. Entry, please. Invited them all inside. And was like, yeah, I did put handcuffs on him. And that's it. Offered no explanation as to why he did it.
Right.
Because why would he do that?
Edwards was like, hey, he brandished a fucking knife on me and said this all happened in the bedroom. Like he put a knife to me, he handcuffed me. Dahmer was like, no comment. Didn't indicate anything as to why he did it. He did tell one of the officers, hey, the key to the handcuffs is in my bedside dresser. When the cop entered the bedroom, Dahmer attempted to pass Mueller to retrieve the key himself. And that is when the second officer was like, hey, back up. You didn't get yourself the first time, so we're going to fucking get it.
Right.
Right.
I hear purring. So now, the cops are in the bedroom. That's when, like, all these red flags, like sirens, start going off to this cop. He was like, there's a knife under the bed. That's kind of weird. He saw an open drawer, which the closer he looked, he saw a shit ton of Polaroid pictures, many of which were pictures of human bodies in various stages of dismemberment. He noted that the decor indicated that they had been taken in the apartment they were standing in. And the cop walked into the living room, showed them to his partners, and went, I think these are real. When Dahmer saw what he was holding, he instantly was like, hey, yo, you not arrested me. And started fighting the officers in an attempt to resist arrest. It was 2 against 1, though.
It ain't.
So he was quickly overpowered,
right.
Quickly got cuffed, and a second squad was called for backup. At this point, the other cop opened the fridge and revealed a freshly severed head of a black male on the bottom shelf.
What the fuck?
As Dahmer was laid pinned under one of the officers, he turned his head to the officer, blank face, and just went, for what I did, I should be dead. That is a direct quote.
Ma'am.
Oh, so many things.
So, obviously, math ain't mathin'. They put up do not cross tape. Like, now they had to do a more detailed search of the apartment. So the CIB, the Criminal Investigation Bureau, showed up. They revealed a total of 4 heads in his kitchen, 7 skulls, some painted, some were bleached. They were found in his bedroom and in his closet. Investigators discovered he had collected blood drippings in a tray in the bottom of his fridge, plus 2 human hearts, a portion of arm muscle. Each of those were wrapped up in plastic bags on the shelves. In his freezer, investigators discovered an entire torso, plus a bag of human organs and flesh that was stuck to the ice on the bottom of the freezer. That was just like the kitchen and bedroom. Elsewhere in his apartment, they discovered 2 whole skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved dinglings, a mummified scalp, and in the 57-gallon drum from the bedroom, 3 further dismembered torsos were dissolving in an acid solution.
Can I just... Let's remulate on that. Let's just marinate on what in the fuck?
Oh, it gets... So one of the quotes from the medical examiner that was helping, like, remove things, he was later stated saying it was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene. Because of how everything was preserved. You know, a total of 74 photos, like Polaroids, detailing the dismemberment of his victims were found.
No, ma'am.
So
Just
private contractors from the fire department's hazmat team had to help remove this disgusting 57-gallon drum. This is a photo of them removing it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then in the photo, because obviously if you're listening, you can't see it, it is two men in full hazmat suits with oxygen tanks and an oxygen mask, like with a trolley, carefully taking this gallon drum down a set of stairs. So all of this happened on July 22nd. He was arrested on July 22nd. Everything was starting to get took out on July 27th or 22nd. Early morning, 23rd, Dahmer was questioned by Detective Patrick Kennedy. He was like, what is with these murders? We found all of this. Obviously, you committed these murders. We have this evidence in your apartment. Over the next 2 weeks, Kennedy and later another detective, Detective Dennis Murphy, would conduct multiple interviews with Dahmer. In total, it came out to 60 hours of interviews and interrogation.
60.
60. Dahmer waived his right to an attorney. He was like, I don't,
because he knew he was done for.
He knew he was done for. He was like, I don't need it. I'll tell you everything.
Oh my God.
Saying that he wished to confess to it all as he had, quote, created this horror, and it only makes sense that I do everything to put an end to it, end quote. He readily admitted to murdering 16 men in Wisconsin in 87, since 87, and one more victim, Stephen Hicks, who he killed in Ohio in 78. He admitted to all the murders. He was like, yeah, I did it. Here's how.
What about the guy? What did he say about the guy that got away?
I believe we actually bring that up.
Okay. Good.
Most of his victims, he says that, I rendered them
My husband, ladies and gentlemen.
He was like, yep, I rendered most of them unconscious before I killed them. This is how I did it. Most of them I strangled, but some of them died because I put acid or boiling water into their brain. However, I have no memory of killing my second victim, Stephen Toomey. He wasn't sure if he was unconscious when being beaten to death. Although he did concede that it was possible that his viewing the exposed chest of him while in a drunken stupor may have led him to unsuccessfully tear his heart from his chest.
Oh my God.
He did say that almost all of the murders that he committed after moving to the Oxford apartments involved a ritual opposing the victims' bodies in suggestive positions, typically with the chest kind of like puffed out, before dismembering them.
Sorry.
He also admitted to engaging in necrophilia.
Oh.
And engaging in acts with their viscera as he dismembered their bodies in the bathtub.
Oh.
Having noted that much of the blood that pooled in his victim's chest after death, he first removed their internal organs and then suspended the torso so the blood would drain into his bathtub before he diced up any of the organs, because he didn't wish to retain, like, if he didn't want, say, the liver of this victim, he would just dice it up.
Right.
And then he would, take the flesh from the body. He then explained how he would acidify or pulverize the bones, what solutions he used. Like, he went into all of it. He confessed to having eaten the hearts, livers, biceps, and tiny portions of thigh on 3 of the victims he killed at the apartments: Raymond Smith, Ernest Miller, and Oliver Lacey.
Jesus.
And to have retained those flesh and organs of other victims for intended consumption. He stated that he would typically tenderize the body parts prior to consuming them, and then he would flavor them with various condiments.
Various condiments? Like what?
Condiments. Salt, pepper. Ooh, this one might taste good in like a meatloaf. Yeah.
Because seasoning.
Yeah. Referencing why he ate his victims, he stated initially he did it because he was curious. And then he added, well, in an odd way, it made me feel like they were even a more permanent part of me.
Fucking hell.
So describing the increased rate of killing 2 months prior to his arrest, he stated that he was just swept up in his compulsion to kill. Quote, "It was incessant and never-ending desire to be with someone at whatever cost. Someone really good looking, really nice looking. It just filled my thoughts all day." When asked why he had preserved a total of 7 skulls and the entire bodies of a few victims, he stated he was in the process of constructing a private altar of victim skulls, of which he intended to display on a black table located in his living room, upon which he photographed the bodies of many of his victims. And this is a drawing of how he figured he was going to do this altar.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Just wow.
He had it all planned out. The display of skulls that was going to be on each side was to be with the complete skeletons of Miller and Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
The 4 heads that they found in his kitchen to have had all the flesh removed and used in this altar, as was the skull of at least 1 future victim. So he was starting to plan this out. Incense sticks were to be placed at the end of each of the black table. Nice. Above which Dahmer intended to place a large blue lamp with an extending blue globe lights.
Ooh.
The entire, all of this was to be placed before a window covered in a black opaque shower curtain, in front of which Dahmer intended to sit a black leather chair.
So he can be proud of his work.
Yeah, so he could just sit there and stare at it all day long. When he was asked who the altar was dedicated to, he replied, "Myself. It was a place where I could feel at home."
Oh my God.
He later described he intended to use it as a place for meditation, where he believed he could draw a sense of power, adding, if this, meaning his arrest, had happened 6 months later, they would have found his altar.
I mean, considering how he was saving the bones.
The bones and the skulls, looking at it, he was already halfway there.
Yeah. If not more. Because you have to count for the earlier bodies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they are pushing this indictment forward. July 25th. Remember, he was arrested the 22nd, right?
Yeah.
July 25th, he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August 22nd, He was charged with another 11.
Another 11?
Because he admitted to all the other murders.
Oh, God.
On September 14th, investigators in Ohio uncovered hundreds of bone fragments in the woodland behind the address in which Dahmer had confessed to killing his first victim, and formally identified 2 molars and a vertebrae. So they were able to identify Hicks through dental records with those molars.
Jeez.
He was then 3 days later charged again with by Ohio with Hicks' murder. However, he was not charged with the attempted murder of Edwards. And he was not charged with the murder of Toomey. He was not charged with Toomey's murder because the Milwaukee County District Attorney only brought charges where a murder could be proven without reasonable doubt, and Dahmer had no memory of actually committing this murder.
Oh my God.
And because of that, no physical evidence of the crime existed. So, a preliminary hearing was scheduled for January 13th of 92, and he pleaded guilty but insane on 15 counts of murder.
I don't think the insanity plea works here.
Right.
So 17 days 17 days later, January 30th, that's when his trial began.
Uh-huh.
He was tried in Milwaukee for 15 counts of first degree before Judge Lawrence Graham. He pleaded guilty but insane, and he waived his rights to a trial to establish guilt as defined by Wisconsin law.
Well, there's that.
Right.
Attorneys at his trial debated whether he either suffered from a mental or a personality disorder. The prosecution claimed that any disorders did not deprive him of the ability to appreciate the criminality of his conduct or deprive him the ability to resist his impulses.
Right.
And the defense was like, okay, but like he suffers from a mental illness and he was driven by obsession and impulses. He wasn't able to control those. Defense experts argued that he was insane due to his necrophilic drive, his compulsion to have intercourse with corpses. Fred Berlin testified that Dahmer was unable to conform his conduct at the time he committed the crimes due to his paraphilia, or more specifically, necrophilia. A professor of psychology and psychiatry, Judith Becker, was the second expert witness for the defense. She diagnosed him as a necrophiliac, though she added that he had informed her he preferred a, quote, comatose sexual partner to deceased ones 75% of the time.
Right.
The final defense expert to testify was a forensic psychologist named Carl Wallsturm, and he diagnosed Dahmer again with necrophilia, but also with BPD, schizophrenia, alcohol dependence, and a psychotic disorder.
Jesus.
He had the board. On February 8th, the prosecution had Fred Fosdell testify, and he testified that his belief that Dahmer was without mental disease or defect at the time he committed the murders. He described him as a calculating and cunning individual, able to differentiate between right and wrong. He was able to control his actions and whose lust just overpowered his morals. He did, however, state that Dahmer was a paraphiliac. His conclusion was that he was not a sadist.
Right. He was completely sane.
The second and final witness for the prosecution was a forensic psychiatrist named Park Dietes, and he began his testimony on the 12th of February. He testified he did not believe Dahmer had any form of mental disease or defect at the time of the crimes, stating that, quote, he went through great lengths to be alone with his victims and have no witnesses.
Right.
He explained that there was no ample evidence that Dahmer prepared in advance for each murder, or he explained that there was ample evidence that Dahmer prepared in advance with each murder, and therefore his crimes were not impulsive.
Right.
Although he did concede any acquisition of paraphilia was not a matter of personal choice, he stated his belief was that Dahmer's habit of becoming intoxicated prior to killing each victim was significant. If he had an impulse to kill or a compulsion to kill, he wouldn't have to drink alcohol to overcome it. He only has to drink the alcohol to overcome it because he is inhibited against killing, D.T. Diaz testified.
Shit.
So he also noted that Dahmer was strongly identified with the villains from Exorcist 3 and Return of the Jedi, particularly the level of power that were held by the villain characters. Expounding on the significance of these movies on Dahmer's psyche, many of the murders committed in the apartment, he explained that Dahmer occasionally viewed scenes of these films before searching for a victim.
Huh.
He did, however, also diagnose him with a substance abuse disorder, paraphilia, and schizophrenia.
Which sounds accurate.
Oh my god, I have been talking for so long. I am so sorry.
Sorry, this is a lot of information. He did kill quite a lot of people. Just a lot.
So I'll speed it up a bit. 2 court-appointed mental health professionals also testified independently of each other, like not for prosecution or defense. They were just called upon by the judge
as witnesses.
Mm-hmm. And he testified that he killed one of them, George Palmero, was a forensic psychologist and a clinical psychologist named Samuel Friedman. Palmero stated that the murders were a result of pent-up aggression within himself. He killed those men because he wanted to kill the source of his homosexual attraction to them. In killing them, he killed what he hated in himself.
There it is.
Palmer said he probably has a severe mixed personality disorder with antisocial disorder, obsessive compulsive. He's sadist, fetishistic, borderline, and necrophilic features, but he was otherwise legally sane. Friedman also testified that he probably did it because he was longing for a companionship, and that's what caused him to kill. He testified he was not psychotic, but he was amiable and pleasant to be with, courteous with a sense of humor, and conventionally handsome and charming in a manner. He was and still is a bright young man. So he diagnosed Dahmer with personality disorder not otherwise specified, featuring borderline, obsessive compulsive, and sadistic traits.
I can see that.
So the trial only lasted 2 weeks. Some of these trials get stretched out, but it only lasted 2 weeks. Each attorney was allowed to speak for only 2 hours. And all of this, they went through everything. They pulled up the photos. They portrayed him as this terrible person, which he was.
Right.
So following the defense's 75-minute closing argument, the prosecution delivered a closing argument describing him as a sane man in full control of his actions who simply strove to avoid detection. He was cold and calculating, and he only retained their bodies merely to afford himself a prolonged period of sexual pleasure. McCain, the prosecution attorney, argued that pleading guilty but not insane to the charges, Dahmer was seeking to escape responsibility for his crimes.
Essentially, yeah.
On the 15th, Dahmer was ruled to be sane not suffering from a mental disorder at the time. And each of the 15 murders for which he was tried, although each count 2 of the 12 jurors signified their dissent. A formal sentencing was postponed until the 17th of February. On that day, Dahmer's attorney announced his client wished to address the court. Dahmer approached the lectern and read a statement that he prepared himself and his defense as he faced the judge. In this statement, Dahmer, and to me, I can tell he's narcissistic from this statement.
Okay.
Dahmer emphasized that he had never desired freedom following his arrest and that he frankly wished for his own death. He further stressed that none of his murders had been motivated by hatred and that he understood that nothing he either said or did could undo the terrible harm he caused to the families of his victims or to the city of Milwaukee, and that he and his doctors believed his criminal behavior could have been motivated by mental disorders. Dahmer added that this medical knowledge had given him some peace, and although he understood that society would never forgive him, he hoped that God would. Dahmer then closed his statement with, quote, "I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor, and I am prepared for your sentence, which I know will be the maximum. I ask for no consideration." He then returned to his seat to await his formal sentencing.
Did he get...
He got life in prison plus 10 years upon the first 2 counts.
Okay.
The remaining 13 counts carried a mandatory life sentence of life imprisonment plus 70 years. The death penalty was not an option for Judge Graham to consider under the penalty phase, as Wisconsin had abolished it in 1853.
Yep.
Upon hearing his sentencing, his father and stepmother requested to be allowed a 10-minute private meeting with their son before he was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portridge to begin his sentence. It was granted, and the trio exchanged hugs and well wishes before he was escorted away. 3 months after he was convicted, he was extradited to Ohio to be tried for his first murder of Stephen Hicks.
Good.
The court hearing only lasted 45 minutes. He then again pled guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a 16th life imprisonment on May 1st.
Wow.
As he should have been.
Right.
So he was placed for the first year of his incarceration. He was in solitary confinement due to concerns for his physical safety should he come into contact with fellow inmates. Right. He got letters from people all across the world like, "I'll give you money," herstophiliacs, like, "Oh, you're so hot, you can kill me." Yeah, he got those kind of letters. He spent that money on cassette recordings, stationery, cigarettes, and magazines. Upon his request, after a year, they took him out of solitary, and he was transferred to a less secure unit. He was assigned 2 hours of daily work cleaning the toilet.
Like the shitty person he is.
Yeah.
Right.
Work detail later expanded to cleaning the prison gym.
Oh, God.
He was later given a copy of the Bible by Detective Murphy after his confession. The wish was granted, and he devoted himself to Christianity and became a born-again Christian. On his father's urging, he also read a creationist book from the Institute of Creational Research. And in 1994, he was baptized by Roy Ratcliffe, who was a minister of the Church of Christ and a graduate of the Oklahoma Christian University, who he met on April 20th. This was conducted in the prison whirlpool. I didn't know prisons had whirlpools.
Apparently they do.
After his baptism, he was visited every week by the minister. They regularly discussed the prospect of death, Ratcliffe later divulged that in the months prior to being murdered, Dahmer questioned whether he was sinning against God by continuing to live. Yes. Referring to his crimes in a 94 interview, Dahmer stated, if a person doesn't think that there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point in trying to modify your behavior to keep it in acceptable ranges? That's just what I thought, anyhow.
Okay.
July 3rd of 94, a fellow inmate named Osvaldo Duworthy attempted to slash his throat with a razor embedded in a toothbrush. As Dahmer sat in the prison chapel after the weekly church service had concluded. He only received a superficial wound and was not seriously hurt by the incident. However, according to Dahmer's family, he had long been ready to die and accepted any punishment in which he might endure in prison. In addition to this, his father and stepmom maintained regular contact. His mother, however, also attempted to maintain regular contact. Prior to his arrest, the two had not seen each other since the Christmas of '83.
Holy fuck!
Joyce related that in her weekly phone calls, whenever she expressed concerns for her son's well-being, like physical well-being, Dahmer responded with the comments to the effect of, "It doesn't matter, Mom. I don't care if something happens to me or not." 94 is when he dies.
Yay!
Yay! November 28th of 94, he left his cell to conduct his assigned work detail. He was accompanied by two fellow inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scaver. The trio was left unsupervised. Are you ready for this? In the showers of the prison gym for approximately 20 minutes. Now again, where did he dismember his bodies?
In the bathtub.
Oh,
where did he die?
In the shower!
At approximately 10 a.m., Dahmer was discovered on the floor of the bathrooms in the gym suffering from extreme head wounds. He had been severely bludgeoned in the head and face with a 20-inch metal bar.
Damn.
His head had shown signs of being repeatedly struck against the wall in the assault. Although Dahmer was still alive and was rushed to a nearby hospital, he was pronounced dead an hour later. Anderson had been beaten with the same instrument. He had died from his wounds 2 days later. So Christopher killed them both.
Jesus.
Scarver, who was serving a life sentence for a murder in '90, informed the authorities he had first attacked Dahmer with the bar as Dahmer was cleaning a staff locker room before attacking Anderson as Anderson cleaned an inmate locker room. According to him, Dahmer didn't yell or make any noise as he was attacked, although after attacking both men, Scarver, who was thought to be schizophrenic, returned to his jail.
Oh my God.
Like his cell, and informed the prison guard, well, God told me to do it. Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead. He was adamant that he had not planned the attacks in advance, although he later divulged to investigators he had concealed the 20-inch iron bar that was used to kill both men in his clothing shortly before the killings.
Jesus.
After hearing of his death, Joyce responded angrily to the media, saying, quote, "Now is everyone happy? Now that he's bludgeoned to death, is that good enough for everyone?" In response, the response of the families of Dahmer's victims was mixed. Some celebrated, some were saddened. Catherine Lacey, the mother of the victim, Oliver Lacey, remarked, quote, The hurt is worse now because he's not suffering like we are.
Jeez.
A district attorney who prosecuted him cautioned against turning him into a folk hero, stating that his death was still a murder. On May 15th of 95, Scarver was sentenced to 2 additional life terms for the murder of Dahmer and Anderson.
I mean, you win some, you lose some.
Dahmer had stated in his will that he wished for no services to be conducted, and he wished to be cremated. September 95, he was cremated, and his ashes were divided between his parents. Owing to a disagreement between his parents as to whether Dahmer's brain should be retained for medical research, the organ was initially retained, but then later cremated in December of 95.
So they just kind of kept it and was like, nah, you know.
Well, because his dad was like, they need to research what the fuck was wrong with him. And his mom was like, there's nothing wrong with him.
He murdered dozens of people.
Yeah. So after everything came to light in 91, a candlelight vigil was held to celebrate and try to heal the community, and was attended by more than 400 people. At the vigil, there was community leaders, gay rights activists, and family members of his victims. After all of this came out in August of 91, an interview given to Christian Science monitor Farrell, who was a professor of community studies, who later stated race relations in the cities had been in disrepair. He had stated that news of the murders, as well as conduct of the Milwaukee police officers John Balkazak and Joseph Garbish in regards to the victim Conrack, exasperated and highlighted racial tensions in the city.
Oh, exactly. Jesus.
So at the time, especially in Milwaukee, that the gay scene was generally underground, and many sexually active gay men were using aliases.
Right.
And because of this, fear, and distrust generated by his crimes, it kind of spread like wildfire, but it was also kind of short-lived. They were very worried about the murderers and all of that. But as the 90s progressed, the usage of aliases became less common amongst the gay community.
Right.
In 92, the apartments where he committed most of his murders was demolished, and it's now a vacant lot.
Good.
Plans for the sites have come up. There are multiple plans. A lot of people are kind of pushing back on it. There were plans to make a playground. There was plans to reconstruct new housing. And then more recently, there was plans to do a memorial garden. But all of these plans, they haven't materialized.
Right.
Dahmer's family was sued by his victims, the families of the 11 victims. There was one lawyer in 96. He represented 8 of the families. They planned to, his name was Thomas Jacobson. He planned to auction off Dahmer's estate, and what money was given would be divided.
Mm-hmm.
A civic group called Milwaukee Civic Pride quickly established an effort to raise funds to purchase and destroy many of Dahmer's possessions. Which
Good.
I get.
Good. Right.
The group pledged $407,222, including a $100,000 gift card, or a $100,000 gift by the Milwaukee real estate developer Joseph Zelber for the purchase of Dahmer's estate. 5 of the 8 families represented by Jacobson agreed to the terms, and Dahmer's possessions were subsequently destroyed and buried in an undisclosed Illinois landfill.
Good.
His dad published a book.
Oh.
It's called A Father's Story. A portion of those proceeds goes to the victims' families.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
Most of the families showed support, although 3 families subsequently sued him for using their names in the book without obtaining prior consent.
I can understand that, but
a third family, that of Stephen Hicks, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Lionel, his wife, and his ex-wife Joyce, citing parental negligence as cause for the claim. Lionel lived with his second wife Sherry until she died in 23 of natural causes, and then he died in 23 of natural causes. Both refused to change their last name and professed their love to Dahmer in spite of his crimes.
Jesus.
Joyce died of cancer in 2000. Prior to her death, she attempted suicide on at least one occasion. His younger brother David changed his name, and he now lives anonymously.
I don't blame him.
Right.
So I don't blame him at all.
No.
So obviously lots of movies, TV shows, like you had stated, were made. Raising Jeffrey Dahmer, released in 2006. The Secret Life of Jeffrey Dahmer was released in 1993. These are all movies. Biographical film called Dahmer was released in 2002.
Right. The closest one that I found is the made-for-TV, which had the actor from American Horror Story, Kevin, in it.
Yeah.
Reason being is because they didn't get... I've seen the tapes of interviews. I've seen the tapes of him walking and stuff and talking. The ones... I mean, it's cold in here, but I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah.
The only one that was able to get his demeanor correct is him. And they did a table talk with him.
Mm-hmm.
I do not, if you have any at all, me as a survivor and you as a survivor, I don't recommend anyone who is a survivor of assault to watch this show. I had to get on the phone with Meg.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, because I can't reach out to my therapist. I graduated. I'm very proud of that. I'm not, if I were able to contact her, I would, but.
Yeah.
No. He couldn't talk to his girlfriend. He's like, during this time that I'm doing this.
Yeah, he did immersive.
He did immersive. He wore weights on his hands and on his legs, on his wrists and on his legs. So that way he could walk with the demeanor, because he walked straight as a board. He was perfect
posture.
Perfect posture. No anything like it was. Normally they said serial killers walk with a gait. Serial killers walk a certain way. He walked, as one chiropractor had stated, with perfection. Like, I can't. Anyways, I know you did your research. I'm very proud of you.
Look, man. 2012 independent documentary came out called The Jeffrey Dahmer Files. Then there was a movie released called My Friend Dahmer. That was 2017. That was actually based on a graphic novel, believe it or not. Then obviously there are some books. The television shows, a lot of it, which are interviews. I think the most recent one that came out is Conversations with the Killer, the Jeffrey Dahmer tapes, commissioned by Netflix, and that came out in 2022. So, Jeffrey Dahmer, this is a movie, Jeffrey Dahmer, Guilty But Insane, that came out in 2013. But yes, that is the murderously depraved world of Jeffrey Dahmer. I hope you're not sick of my voice yet.
No, never.
Oh, definitely not.
No.
Just trying to stay awake.
Yeah, she's fried. She worked the night shift last night. Normally,
I was told I have a very soothing voice by
You
someone.
do.
She does.
That's why I had to get up and start moving around, because I was like, I'm gonna fall asleep if I ain't careful.
There are several things. When it came to Pride Month, I wanted to be very not honorific, but I wanted to be very respectful, but I still wanted to put humor into a lot of things. This was one that I found it hard. Last episode, not so much. Last episode, I was able to put humor into a lot of it because it's Rachel's bedtime. She needs,
it's a lot.
She's pumpkining. This probably was very hard for you to research.
Yeah.
How many breaks did you have to take?
So I think I spent about the last week having to research this, because when I got to a certain point, I actually had to take like a full day.
Right.
And this, I had to finish typing it out at D&D last night, and this was like 4 pages. So it took a lot, and it made me sick to my stomach, which is saying something because I don't eat.
Yeah.
I have an eating disorder. It made me sick to my stomach, like physically ill at times, especially like I've got young kids, and his youngest, like, if you're not counting the murders, his youngest victims were 12.
Right.
That's 2 years away from my oldest.
Right.
So that, it doesn't sit right with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely had to take a lot of breaks. I wanted to be respectful.
Right.
But I also knew, like, this is a very heavy subject.
Right.
So
that's why we have to throw a little bit of humor in there. We're still being respectful to the victims.
Which is why I started calling him Dumber.
We're not respectful to the murderer.
Yeah, no, fuck that guy.
Not
I think
at
he's
all.
burning in hell.
Yeah, no.
I'm sure. I'm quite positive he is.
He is. Have you not seen Hell's Bells? Sit with us a moment as we honor the victims of Jeffrey Dahmer. Stephen Toomey, age 24, born December 19th, 1962, Michigan. Died September 15th, 1987. James Dox Tactor, age 14, born March 1st, 1973, Wisconsin. Died January 16th, 1988. Richard Guerrero, age 25, born December 12th, 1965, Wisconsin. Died March 24th, 1988. Anthony Sears, age 26, born January 26th, 1965. Died March 25th, 1989. Raymond Smith, aka Ricky Beeks, age 33, born 1957, Wisconsin. Died May 20th, 1990. Eddie Smith, 28, born 1962, Wisconsin. Died 1990, June. Body was never recovered. Ernest Miller, aged 22, born in 1968, Wisconsin. Died September 2nd, 1990. David C. Thomas, aged 23, born 1967, Wisconsin. Died September 24th, 1990. His body was never recovered. Curtis Strotter, age 17, born April 6th, 1973, Wisconsin. Died February 18, 1991. Errol Lindsay, age 19, born March 3rd, 1972, Wisconsin. Died July 23rd, 1991. Anthony Tony Hughes, age 31, born August 26, 1959, Wisconsin. Died May 24th, 1991. Konarak Synthemson, age 14, born December 1st, 1976, Laos. Died May 27, 1991. Matt Turner, a.k.a. Donald Montrell, age 20, born 1971, Chicago. Died June 30th, 1991. Jeremiah Weinberger, age 23, born September 29, 1967, Illinois. Died July 5th, 1991. Oliver Lacey, age 23, born June 23rd, 1968, Illinois. Died July 15, 1991. Joseph Braidhoft, age 25, born January 24th, 1966, Wisconsin. Died July 19th, 1991. Please join us in a moment of silence as we honor the victims. Be safe. Be wary. Pour your own drinks.
Don't accept drinks that you haven't seen be poured.
Correct.
If you're at a bar.
Correct.
And
get tattoos.
Get tattoos. Yes, he was quoted saying that in one of the tapes, that the ink from tattoos, going back to the beginning, I kind of skipped over it because everyone was pumpkining. He was quoted stating that he did not go after people with tattoos because the ink from the tattoos made the flesh taste sour.
This is why all of us are tatted up to hell.
Even if he doesn't eat the part with the tattoo, it's in the bloodstream.
Right. So be safe. Eat tamales. Get tattoos.
Don't let them take you to a second location.
Right.
Do not.
If you start to feel off or anything that you've eaten and drank, immediately stick a finger down your throat and puke.
Trust your gut.
Literally. With that, stay spooky, and we'll see y'all next time. Okay, goodbye.
Ciao. Bye.
Next time on the Pandemonium Witches.
He was described as an overweight and unathletic child who had a heart condition. He and his parents were told that he and his parents were also told to avoid sports. And then the next day, they had several drinks to celebrate David's 19th birthday.
Wait, hold on. He met him, hired him, moved him in. You don't even know him?
Cram, the other roommates, consented to a police interview in which he revealed that because of his poor timekeeping, Gacy had once given him a watch, explaining he got it from a dead person.